Patricia Chambers stood frozen in shock, champagne flute slipping from her manicured fingers and shattering on the wooden deck. The party around her fell silent as 50 pairs of eyes turned to witness her humiliation. The man before her, weathered face, worn jeans, and now a gleaming sheriff's badge in his outstretched palm, was definitely not the caretaker she told everyone he was. "Evening, folks," Sheriff James Miller drawled, tipping his hat. "Welcome to my ranch. Funny thing is, I don't recall sending out invitations." Patricia's carefully applied foundation couldn't hide the crimson flooding her cheeks. As president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association, she'd organized this fundraiser with meticulous precision, everything from the string quartet to the catering. She'd assured the HOA board this venue was perfect, a gorgeous ranch property with the owner conveniently out of town. The caretaker, or so she thought, had been amenable to a generous cash payment to look the other way. There must be some misunderstanding, Patricia managed, straightening her designer blazer. "We were told the property was available for tonight's event. Our community is raising funds for the new playground." The sheriff's expression remained impassive. "By trespassing on private property? I spoke with your caretaker. He gave us permission." Her voice pitched higher than intended, causing several guests to wince. "Ma'am, I don't have a caretaker. I live here alone." The realization hit Patricia like a physical blow. She'd been scammed by someone claiming to be the caretaker, taking her cash and disappearing. Worse, she'd brought 50 of Whispering Pines' most influential residents to an unauthorized party on the local sheriff's property. Her perfect reputation was evaporating before her eyes. Board member Elizabeth Chen approached cautiously. "Patricia, what's happening?" The whispers started, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Patricia had built her identity on flawless competence and unquestionable authority. For 3 years as HOA president, she'd ruled Whispering Pines with rigorous enforcement of every bylaw. No fence was too short, no mailbox too quirky, no garden too wild to escape her critical eye and punitive notices. "Everyone needs to leave," the sheriff announced. "Now." But the fundraiser, Patricia protested weakly, should have been held somewhere legal, he finished for her. As guests awkwardly gathered their belongings, Patricia felt her carefully constructed world crumbling. Tomorrow, everyone in Whispering Pines would know about this disaster. The board would question her judgment. The playground project would stall, all because she'd cut corners to secure a venue that would impress everyone with her connections and resourcefulness. "I'll need your information before you leave," the sheriff added. "This is still a trespassing situation." Patricia's mouth went dry. A trespassing charge would devastate her. She'd built her real estate business on her reputation as the neighborhood authority, the woman who knew every rule and followed them to the letter. "Please," she whispered, suddenly desperate. "There must be something I can do." The sheriff considered her for a long moment. "We'll talk after everyone's gone." As her neighbors filed past with sidelong glances, Patricia Chambers stood alone, facing consequences she'd never anticipated when the day began. The community center buzzed with tension as residents filed in for the general meeting. Word of Victor's planned coup had spread, drawing the largest attendance in HOA history. Patricia stood at the podium, watching Victor and his supporters cluster in the front rows, expressions smug with anticipated victory. Sheriff Miller slipped in as the meeting began, taking his customary position against the back wall. Their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement that their arrangement had concluded. Whatever happened next would be Patricia's choice alone. "Before we address new business," Victor announced, rising from his seat, "I move to call a vote of no confidence in President Chambers. Recent erratic behavior suggests she is no longer fit to—" "A moment, please," Patricia interrupted, her voice steady. She placed her leather-bound HOA rulebook on the podium, the Bible she'd wielded for years. "I'd like to address the community first." Victor hesitated, then nodded magnanimously. "Of course, your final statement as president." Patricia surveyed the room, recognizing faces that had once feared her approach at neighborhood barbecues. "For 3 years, I've enforced every bylaw in this book without exception. I believed uniformity equaled quality, that restrictions created value." She paused, finding the Gutierrez family with their elderly mother, who now enjoyed sunshine from her mosaic-tiled ramp. The Winters family, whose solar panels had inspired 7 more installations. The children who had built the community's first little free library. "I was wrong," Patricia declared. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Victor's smirk faltered. "This past month, I've approved projects I would have once rejected without a second thought," Patricia continued. "And our community has flourished, not despite these changes, but because of them." She lifted a folder. "Here are the statistics. Property values up 7%. Community engagement increased by 40%. 3 new community initiatives launched spontaneously by residents who suddenly felt empowered." Patricia stepped from behind the podium, addressing her neighbors directly. "Victor believes I've failed as president because I stopped saying no. He's right that I've changed, but it wasn't a breakdown, it was a breakthrough." She turned to face Victor. "You don't need to call a vote. I'm not fighting to keep my position." His triumphant smile emerged instantly. Instead, Patricia continued, "I'm announcing my campaign for re-election on a platform of balanced governance and community empowerment." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Victor's face flushed crimson. "You can't be serious. After everything." "After everything," Patricia interrupted, "I finally understand what leadership really means. Not control, but service. Not uniformity, but harmony." She returned to the podium, opening her rulebook to a marked page. "I'm proposing amendments to our most restrictive bylaws, replacing them with common-sense guidelines that protect property values while allowing personal expression. And my first act will be to start a community vote on establishing a real playground on land I'm donating from my own real estate holdings." The silence that followed was broken by slow, deliberate applause, starting with Elizabeth Chen, spreading across the room until nearly everyone had joined, leaving Victor and his small faction in isolated silence. 3 weeks into Patricia's month of yes, Whispering Pines was transforming. Vegetable gardens sprouted alongside flower beds. Children's laughter echoed from previously silent yards. A community mural bloomed on the previously blank wall of the neighborhood entrance. Patricia found herself stopping to admire these changes during her daily walks, a dangerous habit. Each creative expression she'd approved represented a loss of control, yet somehow the neighborhood seemed more alive than ever. Not everyone was pleased. Victor Barnes, the vice president who'd always supported Patricia's strict regime, called an emergency board meeting. "This has gone far enough," Victor declared to the assembled board members, pointing to photos of recent neighborhood additions. "That's a treehouse with a zip line, and the Millers installed a pottery kiln in their backyard. Patricia has abandoned her responsibility to maintain standards." Patricia straightened in her chair. "All approved projects meet safety requirements. Safety isn't the only concern." Victor's face reddened. "Property values have increased 7%, interrupted Elizabeth Chen, sliding a report across the table. "I ran the numbers. Houses in Whispering Pines are selling faster and for more money than last quarter." Victor sputtered. That's coincidence. Or perhaps, Elizabeth suggested, people want to live somewhere with character and community, not just matching mailboxes." Patricia studied Elizabeth with new interest. Had her fellow board member always harbored these progressive ideas? After the meeting, Patricia found Elizabeth in the parking lot. "You defended my decisions." Elizabeth leaned against her car. "I defended what's right for our neighborhood. The question is, why the sudden change in you, Patricia? One day you're giving the Wilsons a fine for wind chimes. The next you're community spirit incarnate. What happened at that ranch?" Patricia hesitated. She couldn't reveal her deal with the sheriff without admitting to the trespassing. "Let's just say I gained some perspective." "Well, whatever Sheriff Miller said to you, it's working," Elizabeth replied knowingly. "But Victor's gathering support. He's planning to call for your removal as president, claiming you're mentally unfit after the incident. The vote's scheduled for next week's general meeting." Patricia felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. After all her compromises, she would lose her position anyway. "Thank you for telling me." That evening, as Patricia sat on her pristine patio, the only one in the neighborhood without string lights or potted vegetables. Sheriff Miller appeared at her gate. "Heard about the coup," he said without preamble. "Victor Barnes is quite the strategist." Patricia gestured for him to sit. "You knew this would happen. You knew saying yes to everything would give my enemies ammunition. I knew giving people freedom would change things," he corrected, "including you. The question is, do you still want to fight for your position?" The question struck Patricia like a physical blow. A month ago, the answer would have been an unequivocal yes. The HOA presidency defined her. Now, "I don't know," she admitted, the words barely audible. Sheriff Miller nodded as if she'd confirmed something. "Then it's time for the next phase." "Which is?" "You need to decide what you're really fighting for, Patricia. Position or community? Control or connection?" He stood. "Your month of yes ends the day before the vote. What happens next is entirely up to you." As he walked away, Patricia realized with startling clarity that for the first time in years, she didn't have a carefully crafted plan, and even more surprisingly, the uncertainty didn't terrify her as it once would have. That night, Patricia drove through Whispering Pines, seeing the neighborhood with new eyes. Children's chalk art decorated driveways. Garden lights twinkled invitingly. A group of neighbors gathered around an unapproved fire pit, laughing together. This was what she'd been missing while enforcing bylaws about fence heights and garden placements. This was community, messy, unpredictable, and vibrant. By morning, Patricia Chambers had made her decision. The first HOA meeting after the incident, as residents now called it, packed the community center to capacity. Patricia arrived early, armor of professionalism firmly in place despite the whispers and stares. She'd spent the weekend crafting a narrative, a simple miscommunication about venue rental, quickly resolved, but the knowing looks told her no one was buying it. "Let's call this meeting to order," she announced, tapping her gavel with less force than usual. Board member Elizabeth Chen leaned toward her microphone. "Before we begin, should we address what happened Friday night? Many residents are concerned about the HOA's judgment in planning events." Patricia swallowed hard. A regrettable misunderstanding that has been resolved. Now turning to new business. "My family's application to install solar panels," interrupted Gordon Winters, rising from his seat. "Rejected 3 times despite meeting all technical requirements. I'd like to appeal again." This was precisely the type of request Patricia routinely denied. Solar panels, while environmentally friendly, disrupted the aesthetic uniformity she prized in Whispering Pines. She opened her mouth to deliver her standard refusal when she caught sight of a familiar figure leaning against the back wall. Sheriff Miller, arms crossed, watching her intently. Their deal. 1 month of approvals. "The board," Patricia started, then cleared her throat. "The board approves your application, Mr. Winters." A stunned silence fell over the room. Gordon blinked rapidly. "Excuse me. Your solar panels are approved," Patricia repeated, the words tasting foreign on her tongue. Next item. For the next hour, Patricia approved vegetable gardens, a purple front door, 2 backyard chicken coops, and a little free library in the shape of a spaceship. With each yes, the tension in her shoulders increased while the atmosphere in the room transformed from hostile to confused to cautiously optimistic. When Maria Gutierrez presented plans for a wheelchair ramp with bright mosaic tiles for her mother, Patricia felt physically ill looking at the colorful design that would definitely disrupt the neighborhood's neutral palette. But Sheriff Miller hadn't moved from his position by the wall. "Approved," Patricia forced out, avoiding Maria's shocked expression of gratitude. After the meeting, Elizabeth cornered her in the hall. "What game are you playing, Patricia? For 3 years you've been the Iron Lady of bylaws, and suddenly you're approving everything." Patricia adjusted her blazer. "Perhaps I've realized some flexibility might benefit our community." "This isn't flexibility, it's a personality transplant," Elizabeth replied skeptically. "Does this have something to do with Sheriff Miller showing up at our meeting?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Patricia lied, brushing past her colleague. Outside, the sheriff was waiting beside her car. "Good start," he commented, "though I could practically see you swallowing your objections like bitter pills." "I kept my word," Patricia retorted. though I fail to see how lowering our community standards benefits anyone. Sheriff Miller's expression softened unexpectedly. Come by the ranch tomorrow morning. There's something you should see before you make that judgment. Patricia wanted to refuse, but curiosity got the better of her. Fine. 9 o'clock. The next morning, she drove up the now familiar driveway, surprised to find not just the sheriff waiting, but a dozen children playing in a magnificent treehouse and garden playground that sprawled across his backyard. My sister brings her foster kids here weekends, he explained as Patricia stepped from her car. The kind of place you'd never approve in Whispering Pines. As Patricia watched the children's uninhibited joy in this irregular, non-uniform wonderland of creativity, something long dormant stirred inside her. When was the last time she'd felt such simple happiness? When had rules become more important than the life they were meant to enhance? Your month of saying yes isn't just about making me happy, the sheriff said quietly. It's about remembering what community really means. As the meeting concluded 2 hours later, Patricia found Sheriff Miller waiting outside. Impressive pivot, he remarked. Didn't see that coming. Patricia smiled, genuinely, without calculation. Neither did I, until last night. You never intended for me to lose my position, did you? This was about changing how I used it. The sheriff shrugged. Power isn't inherently good or bad. It's all in how you wield it. Well, your little blackmail scheme worked, Patricia admitted, though I'm still not convinced you wouldn't have pressed charges. Sheriff Miller's eyes crinkled with amusement. Would you believe there was never any trespassing case? The moment I realized you'd been scammed by Mike Renton, this became about justice, not punishment. Patricia's jaw dropped. You manipulated me? I offered you an opportunity, he corrected. You did the rest yourself. As residents streamed past, many pausing to congratulate Patricia on her speech, she shook her head in disbelief. So what happens now? Are you going to keep watching HOA meetings to make sure I don't revert to my old ways? Don't need to, he replied, but I might show up to the next one anyway. I'm thinking of buying property in Whispering Pines. Patricia raised an eyebrow. You'd willingly join an HOA? After everything you've said about rules and restrictions? Well, the sheriff drawled, eyes twinkling with something Patricia couldn't quite identify. I hear the new president might be someone worth getting to know better. As he tipped his hat and walked away, Patricia felt an unfamiliar flutter in her chest, the sensation of possibilities she hadn't permitted herself to imagine in years. Whether she won the upcoming election or not, Patricia Chambers had already gained something far more valuable than authority. She had rediscovered connection to her community, to herself, and perhaps to something entirely unexpected with a certain sheriff who had turned her carefully controlled world upside down. And for once, she was perfectly content not knowing exactly what would happen next. The last headlights disappeared down the sheriff's long driveway, leaving Patricia alone with her humiliation and the imposing figure of Sheriff Miller. The catering staff had packed up with remarkable efficiency, eager to distance themselves from the disaster. Now there was only silence where elegant music had played just an hour earlier. Sit. Sheriff Miller gestured toward an Adirondack chair on his porch. Patricia complied, her designer dress feeling ridiculous now in the cool evening air. I truly didn't know this was your property. Someone claiming to be your caretaker approached me after I mentioned looking for a venue at the coffee shop in town. Tall fellow, dark hair, bit of a limp? The sheriff sighed when Patricia nodded. That's Mike Renton, local con man. Been running schemes like this for months. I'll press charges, Patricia declared, reaching for her phone. Sheriff Miller chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. You're not exactly in a position to be pressing charges, Miss Chambers. You're the one trespassing with 50 guests and enough alcohol to fill a swimming pool. Patricia's hand froze mid-motion. Are you going to arrest me? Depends. The sheriff settled into the chair beside her. I've heard plenty about you, Patricia. The infamous HOA president who fined the Hendersons $500 for planting vegetable gardens in their front yard. The woman who forced the Callaways to tear down their basketball hoop because it was the wrong shade of white. Patricia bristled. Those are bylaw violations. As president, I have a responsibility. To what? Make everyone's life miserable. He leaned forward. Here's my proposition. I won't press charges if you agree to make some changes in how you run things. You can't dictate how I manage the HOA. Patricia protested. I can when you're facing trespassing charges that would tank your real estate business faster than you can say property values. The sheriff's voice remained calm, but his eyes were steel. The way I see it, you have two choices: face charges and explain to everyone why the HOA president couldn't follow basic property laws, or make your community a better place. Patricia's mind raced. Her reputation was already damaged. The gossip would spread by morning, but actual charges would destroy everything she'd built. What exactly are you proposing? 1 month. For 1 month, you approve every reasonable request that comes to the HOA. The gardens, the basketball hoops, the slightly off-white fences. You stop being the neighborhood dictator. And if I do this, then we forget tonight ever happened. Patricia stared at the stars emerging above them, weighing her options. Her phone buzzed with messages from concerned board members. They were already questioning her judgment. If charges were filed, they'd replace her immediately. Fine, she conceded finally. 1 month of approvals. The sheriff nodded, satisfied. I'll be watching, Patricia. Break our deal, and those trespassing charges will seem like a vacation compared to what comes next. As Patricia walked to her car, she felt something unfamiliar: uncertainty. For years, she'd ruled Whispering Pines with absolute confidence in her authority. Now, facing a month of saying yes instead of no, she wondered if she could even recognize herself by the end. What she didn't realize was that Sheriff Miller's proposition would change far more than just her approach to HOA regulations. It would challenge everything she thought she knew about community, power, and herself.